First things first. Good morning. First things first, do you prefer the session to be held in Maltese or in English? I don't know if there are anyone who is English speaking. If so, let us know, please. Because I'll be speaking mostly in English, but if we switch over to Maltese, you know, along the way, I just want everyone to understand English.
Fine. For me, it's fine.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
The presentation is in English, but then if we sometimes switch in Maltese, that should be fine. If anyone does not understand anything, just let us know. So I thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar, where we'll be discussing the subject of well-being at the workplace, which I hope and I think is going to be a very interesting hour. We are going to go through the findings of our latest research about well-being at the workplace and create a platform for a healthy discussion about the topic, which I am sure that all of you in the group will find interesting. I invite people in the group to participate and to ask questions by either raising your hand when you feel that you want to comment, or else in the chat box so that we can also see your questions. Should you not wish to ask your question publicly, feel free to send a private message to Sarah, and Sarah will also let me know that there is a private message over there because of the subject. Maybe some of you might not feel so comfortable. However, obviously this session is also to make people feel comfortable about speaking about the topic itself. Through our findings, we also aim to hear about your experiences and generate discussions that you encounter on a day-to-day basis related to mental well-being. And most importantly, what we can do about it. And with us today, we have professionals working in the field, and I introduce consultant psychiatrist, Dr. Joe Cassar, resident specialist in psychiatry, Dr. Giovanni Grech, both from the Mental Health Services Malta, and Mr. Joseph Farrugia, the Director General at the Malta Employers Association, who will share the knowledge and their experience on the subject. Last thing before we start, the session is being recorded, and we will also send you the recording of the session after, together with the report that we have created with more detailed findings from our research. Everyone seeing the presentation? Okay, it's uploaded, so I can start. So basically today we're going to be trying to understand mental well-being, and we're going to go through a brief introduction, the mental well-being at work, and supporting mental illness. I have already introduced our speakers, and we start off with a definition of what we are discussing today, which is understanding mental health, which is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. This is how WHO, the World Health Organization, define mental well-being. So when we use this definition in the work context, we are understanding that employees who are coping well with the normal stresses of life feel positive and can work productively and contribute more fully to the place of work. And therefore, it is evident that prioritizing the well-being of employees needs to be at the core of the organization. And this will benefit the employees because they feel that they are productive and contributing, and in turn will help the organization to attract and retain employees. And as I stated before, we will be sharing some findings. And from the research we conducted during the first quarter of 2022, there were 79 respondents who were employed individuals that they have stated that they experienced mental health problems related to work. So when we defined this, if they felt anxious, if they felt stressed. And apart from this, 68% of respondents stated that they experienced mental health issues at work in the last 12 months. When we asked the respondents also to rate their mental wellness, 63% rated this positively and 37% rated it negatively. Moreover, the positive rating in 2021 was that of 69%. And maybe I can open the floor to discussions. Dr. Cassar, what can you tell me about this? Obviously, we've just gone through pandemic, and it was a very stressful time. Maybe you can share your views. Switch on your microphone, please, Dr. Cassar.
So I was going to ask if we have any data pre-COVID that we can compare and contrast, because that would make it very interesting.
Yes, actually, this is the third year we're running this survey. And in the final report that is going to be sent out, there is a comparison over the years. If I can give my input on this, pre-COVID, the levels were a bit higher. When compared, were a bit lower, then they went higher in 2021, and in 2022, we have 68%. So we have seen an increase, but it was very slight. The incidence of people experiencing mental health issues at work was still high. So if you can see, 79% of people stating that they have experienced mental health related problems related to work is quite a high percentage. So maybe it's more common than we'd like to admit.
There is a huge gap between 63% in 2021 and 79%, however. I think it's quite a significant gap, or there is a gap which I believe is significant.
Yes, definitely.
The reason I say this is because obviously COVID had its challenges, but it also had its positives as well. I mean, I took some time in saying it, but it has had its positives. And even when it comes to productivity, albeit some people felt, being alone at home, not being at the workplace, but in reality, some people felt safer at home and their productivity actually got better in some instances. What happened in 2022 is obviously 2022 is a bit of a hybrid at all levels. It's not even like 2019, because 2019, if you remember, March of 2019, we had already gone into COVID. So 2019 was pretty much taken up all by COVID as well, as was 2020. But 2022 was a bit of a hybrid, because if one thinks about it, starting January, we had already had areas which started denying that COVID existed. Other areas started saying that COVID did exist. Then airlines, even though there were prevention measures, things like that, if anyone who went abroad realized that no one was really bothering about them. So this created a bit of angst when it comes to people who work a lot like the Maltese. I feel that Maltese people in their work structure are quite inflexible. We are very compartmentalized in the way we think as a culture, and I think even at work. So the moment you take away the normal work structure and you ask people to think flexibly or to think laterally or to think outside the box, that's when people actually start stressing out.
Mm-hmm.
So it is more around their flexibility or inflexibility around coming to a new norm that actually stresses people out, rather than the actual, because, at times when we talk about stress, we believe that there is this elephant in the room that is called stress, that causes stress. Because the reality is a lot of stress is generated by our own brain.
Our perception, you're saying?
Well, our brain, because it's the chemicals in the brain that produce it. The perception is also chemicals in the brain.
Okay.
And it's all related to chemicals. And yes, perception is related to, to a number of factors: character, environment, genetics. So all these factor in. But I give a small example of how much stress was created by us individuals around being rigid, and I use the education system, for example. So the way schools were asked to become flexible in the way they work. And as a psychiatrist, I've often had these interesting situations of, for example, the inflexibility of learning support assistants when people went online. And, what are we going to do now? We are learning support assistants, but we can't go in the patient's house. So how are we going to organize ourselves around? Because there's no judgment on their end. I'm just saying
it's
how
an
difficult
experience.
it is. And so this in itself creates a lot of stress. And then, there was the stress of entrepreneurs and people who are in the industry who have to think about new projects and how to invent new projects. And there again, you see the flexibility of some, the inflexibility of others. I remember one particular restaurant, which when all restaurants were closed down, started delivering, but delivering in a very innovative way. And for example, they had all these dishes where, all were labeled with different colors. And different colors had, different codes of what to put in the microwave, what to put in an oven, how long you take. I mean, it was very, very innovative, albeit there was an expense to it. But again, you realize that the way people perceive things and the way they work around stress can either create more stress or help decrease stress. So that's my point on this. So when we talk about stress, let's not think about, because very often, even when they come to us, you imagine this monster, this elephant, this monster called stress. And it's like they bring it in to your table and you say, this I have stress. Yes, now, solve it. And stress isn't solved by medications. It's solved by a number of corroborating variables that you have to take into account.
That needs to be sustained long term, and we'll discuss maybe at a later stage.
Correct. That needs to be there, because you also realized in the industry which companies had their thinking hat pre-COVID. So when COVID came, they were all prepared. And those companies which had no alternative plan, no to plan B, so probably no occupational psychologists involved in helping them pre-COVID. So we did feel this as well. So there were, different sectors that we could feel were prepared, others who were not prepared.
Thank you. Mr. Farrugia, you want to contribute from your end? Microphone, please.
Yes, of course, these are very interesting findings and of interest to employers. And maybe what such figures merit is to understand or try to identify the reasons for the mental health issues. So the reasons could be various, of course. It could be to the workload. It could be financial reasons. And the onset of teleworking in many companies also created a certain element of stress in some situations. Therefore, some employees found it easier to work from home, but others found it stressful in itself, especially those that had to juggle between work duties and family duties at the same time. And indeed, I have come across cases of employees who requested to return to the workplace, because for them it is better to keep work and family as distinct as possible. Possibly even the uncertainty that has been generated by the COVID in itself created stressful situations. Many employees were afraid of losing their job, therefore, or experienced reduced income. So that in itself also generates stress, because although initially most people thought that the pandemic would last for a few months, but as it dragged on, then many people were fearing that besides the loss in income, they might also have to face a loss in employment. Fortunately, this has not happened in many cases. Therefore, I think we have managed to keep people in employment, but nonetheless, it's in itself that could have created an element of stress. Also changed work organization. The fact that many people who might have been accustomed to work in a particular manner pre-COVID, but then had to adjust to work in different ways, okay, even using different technologies. For example, I am a visiting lecturer at university, and when we switched to online lecturing, I found it extremely stressful, because one, initially I could not adjust myself to delivering lectures remotely, and secondly, I could not even adjust the technology which is required. So initially, I found it very difficult to record the lectures, because initially we were recording the lectures and sending them out to the students. Therefore, that in itself created a stressful situation for me, and I'm sure that many employees might have passed through similar experiences. However, such studies themselves are very important, because they send a very important signal to employers that they need to watch out. They need to be aware of issues at the workplace, and at times even outside the workplace, that may affect the mental health of their employees. As you showed us, Joanne, in the definition of stress by the WHO, okay, or mental health, is the ability for employees to work productively. And therefore, it is clear that if you have employees who are stressed out or even suffer from burnout, to take an extreme case, then that certainly is not conducive to higher productivity. And in general, it will be the whole enterprise that suffers, even because of the motivational effect, both on the people concerned and also to their co-workers. Therefore, it can create a general atmosphere of disappointment. It can cause higher turnover as well. Therefore, you could have loss of productivity from that aspect. Therefore, employers need to identify these areas, because at times it could be areas within an organization where you have people suffering from more stress than others, to distinguish between pressure and stress, because pressure could be a positive thing in itself. So, for example, pressure arising from challenges. Well, challenges are welcome. Problem-solving problems are welcome because it makes the job challenging in itself. But at times, of course, that can lead to a certain amount of pressure. It is when the pressure turns into unmanageable stress that it really becomes a problem on the mental well-being of the employee and also on the performance of the organization.
Thank you. We move on to another finding. When we asked the respondents if they have ever taken, you want to ask a question? No. And when we have asked respondents if they have ever taken time off from work as a result of poor mental wellness, it is interesting to see that 62% answered no. And obviously 38 answered yes. And from those who answered no, 76% said that they did not do so as they did not feel the need to do it. And so they didn't feel that the element of rest could contribute to their mental wellness. Dr. Grech, can you comment maybe about this?
Sure, Joanne. Obviously, taking time off and disconnecting from the work is an important element of maintaining a person's wellness. We read about the right to disconnect, not to maintain our responding to emails, responding to messages continuously, because it is important that we have that space where we can focus on other things in life. Obviously, work is a major aspect of our life. We've seen, as we were discussing before, that throughout 2020, 2021, and 2022, we were adjusting to a number of different situations. So in terms of restrictions, in terms of work situation, in terms of teleworking, and obviously our ability to adjust to all these changes was challenged. So it is important that a person takes time off to recuperate and adjust to these issues. What I'm worried here is that there is obviously a proportion of people who, 24%, who did not reply that they didn't need to take the rest. So what are the reasons for these people? Where they may be afraid that if they take time off for their mental well-being, this would be perceived negatively. Do we feel that we actually can take time off for our mental wellness? Usually, if you are sick, if you get COVID, you get quarantined, or at least and it feels as though it is your right to be sick. But do I feel that it is also my right to take sick leave when I suffer from depression, for example, or whether I have generalized anxiety disorder? And unfortunately, there is a bit of a disparity between how we perceive physical illness and how we perceive mental illness. And usually this takes us also to the issue of stigma, where mental health is much more stigmatized. And this obviously might be one of the reasons for this proportion of people who maybe feel that they need to take time off for their mental well-being, but do not.
In fact, I was going to ask you why maybe people do not feel comfortable. I don't know, any of the panelists, maybe they want to contribute to this. You mentioned stigma. However, from the perspective of employers, what would you suggest that employers can do? Because it will directly impact the well-being of a person and their happiness at their workplace. And it will impact also their performance. So maybe, I don't know if Joe, Dr. Cassar wants to say maybe what employers can actually do about certain situations where this occurs.
That's a difficult question because it also depends on the employers themselves, so the individuals themselves and their own anxieties. Because in this whole process, we have to understand that the employees have their anxieties, but the employers have their own anxieties as well. And so,
We're all
and the anxiety,
human. Yes,
pardon?
we're all human, so.
You know, but they're also different. The
They're always-
anxieties that the employer has is very different from the anxieties that the employee has.
Mhm.
And the strategies are different. So one question is, once I gave a talk to professionals, and it was called "Even the Pope Needs a Confessor." And basically, it was about the fact that even employers need their own mentors, their own strategists to help them come to terms with their own anxieties and angst, because this is something that we need to understand as well. And if the employer is anxious and if the employer is stressed, that's going then by osmosis to go to the employee. So, what strategies? I think the first important strategy is that every workplace, whether small or big, because this is also the other misnomer, at times we feel that, small places of work which have 4 employees should be treated differently from huge places of work which have 1,000 employees. Well, yes, they should be treated differently, but they both need to have strategists, industrial psychologists, occupational psychologists, who help them understand how to deal with stressful situations, with situations which are outside the norm, which will happen. It will happen anytime. Not at the same level we had COVID, but it will happen. And so one way to deal with this is to actually each and every workplace to have its own professional. There are actually some industries which have their own employed occupational psychologists. You don't need to have an occupation employed by the industry, whether it's not viable, but to actually, once every so often, take time off from the place of work together as a place of work, to think outside the box and to think together of how to deal with stressful situations is extremely important. So these days will then help in the long run when stress hits the fan. And so one of the ways I think about this is, and this is what I said in the very beginning, those industries, those places of work which had already in place strategies to help employees and employers. One question I ask, how many of our employers in Malta actually seek their own mentor, their own help?
Mm-hmm.
We see this, for example, in specialists. In Malta, very few specialists seek their own mentors. Unlike, the US, you actually boast about how many mentors you have. And the more
Yes.
money you have, the more mentors you have.
Yeah.
As an employer, I'm talking about.
Yes.
In Malta, it's the other way around. In Malta, it's shameful to have a mentor. So some people are shy. I'm a psychiatrist, who should be my mentor? Of course I have a mentor. Now, because if I don't have a mentor, who am I going to bounce difficult situations with? So the first thing I question is, employers. So do employers feel humble enough to seek their own help and, their own mentorship? And then in so doing, do they employ someone to give mentorship to their employees? And then together, do they have a system wherein, twice a year, they go away from the system, they stop, contemplate and think? I believe like that, we can really move on. And when I say mentors, I don't specifically only speak about mentors regarding their place of work, because we see this happen all the time. So when I talk about mentorship, I don't just talk about, for example, let me take our case. Me and Giovanni are psychiatrists. So us having away days about mentorship should not focus on only dealing about difficult patients. That should happen for me with my own mentor, but away days as systems should focus about system issues, not about individual issues. So again, I don't know, if you take a bank, for example, a commercial bank, away they should not focus about, difficult customers at the bank, but should focus about the system issue of what the commercial bank is having a problem with as a system, so that people can address that. Otherwise, it will be, people mix up individual issues. So, again, me as a professional having an individual problem with a patient, or a commercial, someone working in a bank having an issue with certain difficult customers, versus system issues, management. What issues
More
are
strategic.
there?
Yes.
I don't know if you understand my point.
Yes. More on a strategic level on how we're going to work together.
Yes, but strategic again, because in Malta you have to be very pragmatic. Again, not getting, someone from the United States talking about strategy in a theoretical way that no one can even understand, but actually getting the employees being able, because this is very difficult in Malta, because we're a very small country and people are scared to talk, but being able to even, pinpoint specific issues with management. How much are we able to do this? Because again, Joanne, very often we get these, lecturers, misco does it a lot. You get a lecture and you lecture people and then they go home. But that's not going to give, I don't think it will give 1% of what we need to go. We need to get people to actually talk. Having breakout rooms and having people to be humble enough to understand and not feeling criticized when they're employers. I think it's also,
yes, it's also creating a safe space.
Correct.
Yes,
correct.
That's what I'm saying. Joe, you wish to add anything, or I can move on?
Well, I think what we're saying here is also related to the industrial relations setup within the companies. By industrial relations, not just in a unionized environment, but even when the place of work is not unionized, because it refers to the relationship between employees and even between employees and employers. Dr. Cassar mentioned repeatedly the word humble. And yes, I think part of the solution to any problem is to accept that the problem is there, or that the problem can emerge. And certainly, employers need to monitor constantly the workplace to see where they might have areas that in themselves generate stressful situations or exaggerated stressful situations, and also problems that may be at individual level. Therefore, it's not just about saying a particular person is not being as productive as before, or that particular person has changed the attitude at the place of work over the past few months, but also trying to understand the reasons that may be creating such situations. at this moment, at this point, companies that have human resources departments usually deal with such situations themselves. Few companies have an automatic link to occupational psychologists. I agree there. Therefore, we do not have that culture as yet. Particularly, I would say among the micro businesses that might not even have a human resources department because they don't have the scale to warrant having that sort of setup. But larger companies do train their HR people to identify, to deal with such situations, and if it is beyond their competence, then to involve occupational psychologists. Now, of course, one could say that this is not a proactive way of dealing with the situation, because you will call in the professionals only once the problem arises. But it could be difficult to preempt certain problems. However, I would agree that there needs to be some sort of periodical audit, which would help employers to have a workplace which offers a better well-being to the employees. Okay, and as Dr. Cassar said, even to the well-being of the employer himself or herself.
I believe that, as Dr. Cassar also mentioned before, there needs to be a system in place that is always constant, so that we wouldn't need to have something like the pandemic, and then we need to see how to deal with it. It will need to be something that is there constant to support all the employees throughout. Obviously, then it needs to be also feasible from a business point of view. But there are a lot of entities that offer services and also companies set up agreements with them who have this kind of service and offer it to workplaces. We have to move on. We also asked.
Joel, I wanted to, if I may.
Yes, of course. Whenever you want.
I just wanted to also say that I might be a bit presumptuous in saying this, but let's also think at a national level. It was interesting for us in the mental health field to see even how government and how the government actually, thought about it. And if you think about it, there was a huge injection of a monetary injection in the system. No, the government helped with a number of monetary and financial injections. But has anyone questioned if the government thought about helping at a psychological level in the industry, whether government actually employed occupational psychologists and mental health workers to help corporate systems or to help big industries or to help small industries besides the monetary injection. So this is the way, this is the way people think. And we need to help them think also outside the box. I don't know if you understand where I'm coming from. Mm-hmm. I'm not here to judge or to question, because I think, the financial injection helped and helped a lot. But then, there were other strategies that needed to be used to help the industry. And I question, were they used? Should they have been used? And if we do have another whatever, we talk about pandemics, it could be an earthquake for all we know. So, let's also start helping governments and systems to think also around the psyche, around mental health.
Yes, thank you. I was saying, when we asked respondents about the effects of mental health at work, 58% of respondents stated that they often find their jobs stressful.
Sorry to interrupt you, Joanne. We're not seeing the slide anymore.
You're not seeing anything?
We're seeing the first slides.
You should click on resume slideshow, perhaps.
Let me just go back to Zoom.
In fact, we're seeing the presentation on the end. Now it's not in a presentation mode.
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
Yes, it's okay.
Okay now.
okay.
You need to just put it in PowerPoint mode and in slideshow mode.
Okay. I didn't do anything, but anyway.
Okay.
So, hello. 58% of respondents stated that they often find their job stressful. 50% claim that they experience pressure. And 43% claim that they feel that they have a heavy workload. And here is where we start seeing how people, as we were saying before, perceive stress. And maybe Dr. Grech, do you agree that pressure and heavy workload can be a cause of stress? And what strategies maybe can employers and people who are present here use to tackle this?
So obviously the pressure at work, the lack of time to fulfill that pressure will, when for a prolonged period of time, can result in burnout. And I believe that this is the image that sort of refers to feeling burnt out, which refers to the fact that a person has an emotional depletion of emotional strategies to cope with the stress one is passing through. And people start feeling emotionally exhausted, that they are drained with their work. They feel depersonalized, that they are no longer interested in their clients or their patients. And there is a reduced personal accomplishment in the way they rate their performance is rated negatively. Burnout has been related to organizational factors, and this is why employers need to be aware of this and invest in their organization to avoid a burnout. It is also related to commitment, how committed the employee is to the organization, the workplace, which obviously then will affect performance. It will affect high turnover rates, etc. So it is a priority that employees should, I believe, similar to other investments, invest in the workforce to avoid situations of burnout. Now, obviously, when you think about emotional exhaustion and depersonalization and personal accomplishment, how can the employer actually affect these issues? And they have been found to have relationship with areas of work life, such as workload, for example. Do I have the time to fulfill the work that I am supposed to do comfortably? Is the issue of control. Can I influence my own work? For example, if I need a new equipment, can I speak to my employer and ask for it and sort of get that equipment I need to continue develop my own work? Is there a sense of community? Okay, so do I feel, some people refer to their work environment as a family? Is there that sense of community, that supportive environment that helps me through my day at work? The issue of reward. So am I getting rewarded not only in terms of monetary reward, but also in terms of recognition? Am I recognized for my efforts? Am I recognized for my successes at work? is the work environment fair? So are people rewarded or given opportunities based on a fair system? Or are we living in a situation where favoritism reigns and people are rewarded depending on who they know? And also there is the issue of values. So are my values in line with my organizational values? These issues have been found to be related to burnout. So having a mismatch between the employee and the employer, the organization and the workforce, a mismatch in these areas will result in increased emotional exhaustion, increased depersonalization, and a decrease in personal accomplishment. Essentially, if there is this mismatch, you will result in having a workforce which is burnt out. So obviously this is an issue, and we're seeing high numbers throughout this presentation, which are quite shocking, that 70% of people feel mental health issues at work. Almost 60% feel their job stressful. This is an issue which needs to be addressed.
Before we continue, we have a comment from Mr. Joe Camilleri from Teva. I'll be reading the comment. In my experience, work-related anxiety occurred when I felt psychologically unsafe. Issues during this period were tackled with a concern on my career growth and sometimes even my employment. On the other hand, during most of my working life, I have had leadership that provided me with a psychologically safe workplace. And these periods allowed me to look at issues as challenges and really be at my best, even if long work hours, intense discussions, tough discussions, etc. were required. This is just my experience. Is there data that links psychological safety with anxiety and mental health?
I don't know if any of the doctors want to answer this.
I think they are one and the same thing. Psychological safety, when someone is not feeling psychologically fear, in itself is anxiety. Not feeling psychologically safe is fear. So that in itself is anxiety. And so they are one and the same thing. And so the data is definitely there. We are seeing it with our own eyes. And this is what I was saying, that again, we saw a huge impetus and a huge force around, around monetary injections in systems. But we didn't see a huge impetus and force around psychological injections in systems. And this is where people start feeling psychologically unsafe.
And to add on that, Tiziana Gatt also said, in many companies, we are just numbers. If you have a problem, then she said, bye-bye. So you have to deal with it yourself.
Yes. And this is something I must say.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. So let me just mute. Okay.
I have to say this, but I see a number of, at times I'm employed by companies to see clients, but I most often see clients from companies. And you see this whole issue around clients feel that they're numbers. So, on paper, they're given the feel that they are important, but then when push comes to shove, they do feel there, and they are numbers. And this is, I can't go into the specifics because, Malta is too small. But, you do feel that, that's not true. They're not cared for. People don't feel cared for. They are part of a production line, not just, I'm not talking about a production line, I'm talking about a metaphoric production line. So don't take me wrong. I'm not talking about factories here. I'm talking about a metaphorical production line. And this is sad. This is sad. And this is what I was talking about. We do need to understand that part of the right of a worker, part of the right of an employee is to have his or her psychological well-being taken care of. And hopefully in the future, unions start talking about this. Recently, we're seeing this in the judiciary system, where we are, employed now as specialists to give percentage disabilities to people who have been traumatized at their place of work. Because, psychological disabilities are there and we need to take care of them. And hopefully this whole culture of taking care of the mental health, the psyche, starts slowly seeping in. And for people to understand that if they really want to have a productive system, they really need to take care of the mental health, of the mental well-being of their employees. And not just by talk, but by doing things.
Mm-hmm. Joe, you want to add on to this?
Yes, I agree with what is being said. However, and I'm going to be clear here. One of the barriers to all this is a certain element of mistrust between employers and medical practitioners in general. Why? Why am I saying this? Because the general feeling is that any employee can obtain any certificate for any kind of condition, whether it is physical or psychological, if that employee wants to be absent from the place of work. Now, I'm not commenting whether this is true or not, but it is certainly a perception that is out there, and therefore employers may doubt the veracity of certain certification. And I believe this is something which needs to be tackled, in a tangible way. We need to improve the credibility of practitioners with employers, because there have been too many cases of employees who absented themselves from work. Okay, and it is clear that even when they provide certification, they were not really suffering from any conditions. So I don't want to be controversial here, but this is the reality. It is a reality. It is an unpleasant reality, but I believe that it is one of the steps or one of the issues that needs to be addressed in order for companies to be more open to engaging professional people.
I think here the element of transparency is essential. So the trust
and
element,
trust, yes, the trust element
includes
is key.
three. So we have the employees, the employers, and obviously the medical practitioners. However, curbing any sort of abuse from any of the parties. So, it's a...
Let me interject a bit here. And I don't want to be controversial, because I don't want to in any way. But I'm also part of the Medical Council in Malta. And we do see rarely, I must say rarely, certificates of employers, certificates of medical doctors who employers highlight as being questionable. So this happens. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but let us not extrapolate this into making it sound that it's the norm. The norm is that, unfortunately, for patients, mental health is not something you can quantify with a blood test. I mean, we can take, there are very specific brain specs and PET scans and things like that, but we're not going to start taking PET scans with the waiting list we have for any patient who is depressed. So that is important to understand. So yes, a number of psychiatric patients, mental health patients, don't have anything tangible to show. They don't have a fracture to show to their doctor. So yes, at times it's not easy for someone to say this person is depressed, But let me make it very clear that depression is not something that people can easily visualize. It takes us psychiatrists at times months to understand someone who is really depressed. One question to this is, I put it to the employer now, Joe here. When an employer starts seeing a number of his employees taking sick leave for mental health issues, should that employer start wondering why people are crying at his place of work? So why are kids crying? I give the example of a priest who once was delivering a sermon, and there was a baby crying in the church, and everyone was looking at the baby, and the priest said, why are you looking at the baby? The baby is doing, God's will. You should focus on me. And I do that, I put this into the opposite now. Why shouldn't we really think about babies crying? Babies don't cry because they have nothing. They're either hungry, they're in pain, they're bored. So when employees start taking sick leave, please let us start questioning, why are employees taking sick leave?
Well, I agree with you.
Can they all? I mean, yes, some of them will have issues with personalities and would want to abuse. And those people should be out of the workplace ASAP. But not all are like that. And let's, focus on the majority. I think the majority are genuine people who are feeling burnt out, and their employers need to question why they are burnt out.
Yes, I agree. In fact, you could have departments that are suffering from such situations. And that is when employers need to be careful to look into what could be creating such situations. Because frequently, they also result in a high turnover. Okay, for example, recently I've come across an organization which over the span of a year had a turnover of more than 80% of their employees. Okay, then the obvious question is, what is wrong in there? There must be something which is causing these people to leave. So what is it? Is it low remuneration? Is it a heavy workload? Is it? It could be also it could be members of management that may not be treating their subordinates as they should. Therefore, there could be so many different causes for such situations. And yes, the employers, even in the interest of the organization now, even in the interest of the profitability of the enterprise, must investigate such situations. So I agree with you also that the majority of employees are honest people. Therefore, God forbid if everyone was an abuser of sick leave, because the whole country would stop if that were the case. But well, on the one hand, you do have a percentage of abusers or who would try to create situations whereby they would appear to be the victim of the system within an organization. But then, yes, there are many situations whereby the business owners have to be honest with themselves and say, well, we really need to tackle the situation, for example, in the stores department. So what's wrong there? As you say, why are people crying? And I've worked in places where I've seen people crying behind their desks. So I'm familiar myself with such situations. And the reason, well, could be work-related. In other cases, it could be due to problems that have occurred outside the workplace. But one would be able to distinguish between the two, because if you have 5 out of 8 people, to take an extreme case, doing the same job, who are suffering from these symptoms, then clearly there must be something wrong with either with the workload or with the supervision or something like that. But when you have individuals that are exhibiting certain symptoms, then it could also be a situation that is outside the workplace. Now, does that mean that the employer should not involve himself or herself? No. I believe that whatever the situation, I think employers should have a caring approach towards their employees, even if their problems may arise from circumstances that are outside the workplace. And I know of many cases where companies have actively assisted their employees in such situations, at times even referring them to specialized help. For example, in the case of addictions, which could be drug related, it could be gambling, okay, it could be family problems, breakup of a marriage, loss of a close relative. So those problems often manifest themselves in the performance of the employee during work time. And as I'm saying, management must understand these situations. Most frequently, it might not be the fault of the employee, but it could be due to these circumstances, which are either internal to the organization, or also they could be external as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Dr. Cassar had to leave because he had other commitments, but we will continue.
Before we continue, Tiziana Gatt added another comment that in August 2022, there should be an EU quality of life directive that needs to be transported to Maltese laws and policies. And she said kind of that we'll have to see what the outcome of this. Maybe mental health will be given a priority.
Yes. Dr. Grech.
I hope it will be given a priority. I wanted to add to what Mr. Farrugia was saying, and it is true that it's not always the workplace. People have other aspects of their life, and things can go wrong in other aspects of one's life as well. But I have had many patients who felt very well supported by their employers, by their colleagues at work, in helping them pass through these difficult situations. So that caring attitude that Mr. Farrugia spoke about is extremely important when this happens outside, when issues happen outside of work, but also when issues happen within work.
Yeah.
I believe that a caring attitude is key to understand the problem and move forward towards a solution.
Mm-hmm. And then we move on to the effects of the mental health at work. So people stated that the most element that is affected if they are going through maybe a difficult time is trouble concentrating, then followed by being less patient with clients, customers, and colleagues. And so there are more sparks and conflict with colleagues. Dr. Grech, maybe you can tell us what maybe signs we can look out for and that would indicate that a person could be, because obviously they need to disclose themselves, going through a difficult period of time with regard to their mental health.
So in general, when a person has a mental disorder, it usually affects one's mood, one's behavior, one's emotions. So it's no surprise that these are issues which employees felt that indicate that something is going on. And we know from ourselves, if we're worried about something, it's difficult to concentrate. If we have something on our mind, we're not in the mood to speak to others. We might be more irritable and fight with other people. So if the person is passing through depression, anxiety, adjustment disorder, burnout, all these will affect concentration. I think what it's going back to basics. If you have a friend and you feel that your friend is off for one reason or another, sometimes it's not because you've seen something, but it's just a feeling you have. I think the important thing there is to be open and comfortable with asking that question, and how are you, what is going on. I think that approachability goes a long way in terms of helping the person speak. You mentioned, Joanne, the person has to tell you himself or herself. But I think having that
This connection will talk.
So
what we're saying here is that the relationship element is essential between colleagues at the workplace, right, Dr. Grech?
Okay, connected again.
No.
No.
Hello?
But we can. Hello? Yes.
I'm having problems with the connection.
That's why
I don't know till where.
Okay?
I prefer face-to-face always, but I don't know till where you heard, but I think what I was saying is that it's important to have that open,
about
safe
the
space.
Having a relationship with your...
And when issues are sort of not within that person's normal, ask about them, find out what's happening.
Yes, thank you. Another interesting finding that was highlighted more than usual this year is that 92% of respondents agree that employers have a role to play in looking after the mental well-being of employees. Now, we were mentioning that it is important, yes. However, we also need to keep in mind that 48% of respondents stated that they would not know how to approach the topic. So here we're mentioning again that we need to have some relationship, trust, a platform where the communication about what is actually going on is essential. And this can be done through supporting mental wellness. I think we have a comment, right, Sarah?
Yes. So basically, this person agrees, yes, Ruth Farrugia agrees that the relationship element is very important. To have the one-to-one chat every now and then with employees and keeping your eyes open to listen if a colleague or employee is going through tough situations, or just telling them that you're available to listen and help, obviously without any judgment.
We also asked employees which initiatives they would like to introduce, their employers to introduce at the workplace. And 40% mentioned that they would like stress reduction initiatives. So maybe how to deal with certain pressures, certain workloads, and how to manage stresses. 34% mentioned work-life balance initiatives. An example of this would be, for example, working on flexible hours, and 25% mentioned healthy lifestyle initiatives. We also asked respondents to let us know if their workplace provides any initiatives which help improve mental well-being, and 47% stated that they are offered flexible hours and work-life balance initiatives. However, 34% mentioned that they are not offered any initiatives that support mental well-being. Joe, do you want to comment on these numbers?
Yes. Well, if we look at the initiatives that can be offered, well, 40% are saying stress reduction initiatives. And that could involve also an analysis of workloads and analysis of job descriptions to see what can be done to relieve stress if necessary. Okay. Work-life balance initiatives. Work-life balance initiatives are not, of course, limited just to flexible hours, but they could take various forms. And many companies are actually exploring different types of work-life balance measures. And in fact, it shows that 47% have some sort of, or are offered, work-life balance arrangements. We need to be realistic here and acknowledge that not all jobs, not all tasks are open to work-life balance. For example, we've been seeing a proliferation of teleworking in Malta, which is good in itself. But one cannot assume that teleworking is possible for any type of job. Indeed, studies reveal that it is possible for roughly around 25% of existing jobs. However, there are other measures that can be taken, and I think employers should be open to a more flexible way of working. And I believe this is happening in many organizations. It's happening even because of competition in the labor market. So today, the way to attract people to work for you might not be increased pay. Indeed, you might have persons who are not interested in an increased pay, but what they desire is to be productive, but to be able to work flexibly. And these systems could involve teleworking, of course, but you could have flexible hours, you could have reduced hours. So many employees are asking for a reduced working week. That is the possibility of working 30 hours instead of 40, even if they have their pay reduced accordingly. Interesting is the healthy lifestyle initiatives. 25% referred to this. And well, what lifestyle initiatives could be taken in the place of work? There are, of course, occupational health and safety parameters which have to be respected. For example, noise levels and light, space, etc. But they could extend also to conditions of employment. For example, we know that many companies in the financial sector, even gaming companies, offer their employees memberships in gyms and other such initiatives. For example, a healthy canteen, access to healthy food in a canteen. So this could take various forms, even the distribution of hours. So some companies find that if they offer a 4-day working week and you have the 40 hours distributed over 4 days instead of 5 days, it will benefit the employees as well. So these different forms of implementing such measures come about through careful study and also through, there's an element of experimentation. So they try out certain systems to see what the results would actually be, both on the employee and on the company.
I think also worth mentioning, to add on to what you were saying, Joe, is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Employers it cannot be, exactly. Employers need to identify what their employees actually want, because I've seen many times that, for example, an HR department is really excited that they are implementing this initiative, and then it is not taken up by anyone because it's not actually what the employees are actually looking for. So it's important that before introducing any initiatives, because we're saying, yes, we're taking care of mental well-being of our employees, we need to identify what is really valuable for employees, what they really actually want, because that will then make sense for the employees and they can actually value it. We also asked employees what they would like companies and employers to offer. And 84% stated that they would attend a workshop to achieve a positive work-life balance. If it is offered by the workplace, 83 stated that they would take part in team building activities. 81% stated that they would attend leadership development programs, and 77% would consider stress or anger management sessions. So these are quite specific. Dr. Grech, in general, what do you think works in helping, maybe taking care of mental wellness at the workplace?
Joanne, before I answer that, I would
Yes.
like to have a comment what this was said before. When I talked about burnout, it's about the mismatch between the employer and the employee. And what you were referring to, the HR department launching something which the employee doesn't want. It's a mismatch. And that also leads me to mention empathy. Having the ability to walk in someone else's shoes. It goes beyond understanding. It's actually trying to feel what if you're an HR person, what your employee is passing through and feeling through. And I think that having a sense of empathy within the workplace, when making leadership decisions, I think it is extremely important, because that will help mitigate that mismatch, help improve and having a better match. Looking at these figures, I think they're extremely encouraging. Most people would actually attend a workshop on positive work-life balance, team building activities, leadership, and these are all positive things. I think this presentation has shown us that yes, there is an issue with regards to mental well-being at the workplace, but there's also a workforce which wants to address it as well. Now, what would work? Dr. Cassar had already mentioned about team building activities, and I think that is an extremely important exercise, getting the work team together. I had mentioned before also that there should be a positive, caring attitude. The empathy, which I mentioned, so having empathy at work also helps understand and helps address that mismatch. Obviously, as it has been said, this is not a one size fits all, and I think it's about understanding what one can do within that particular job. Having a work-life balance is not always easy. I think this needs to be a priority. It is important to have this as a priority, but I think there should be a commitment both from the employer and the employee towards working towards a better workplace environment.
Thank you. And we also asked, this is the last slide, we also asked respondents what they do to reduce stress, what they do to take care of their mental well-being. And 49% stated that they would do physical exercise to reduce stress. 42% would talk to someone, and this is something that we mentioned before, where the colleagues come in and the support system comes in, and even ideally also talk to the employer. 29% stated that they would get more sleep, and 12% stated that they would do nothing. Joe, Dr. Grech, I don't know if you want to comment on this. This is more of a personal preference, so there is no right and wrong.
With regards to evidence, there is good evidence that exercise actually helps with anxiety and stress. So it's good that half of the respondents mentioned exercise. Unfortunately, I think as a country, thinking about our obesity issue, yes. This needs to be pushed further, yes. But that is extremely a good way of tackling stress and anxiety. Obviously, having a supportive system, and this is what the second highest answer alludes to, is also an extremely important element. Having that person to talk to share the burden, maybe it not always at work, but maybe even in your family life, or maybe even professionals, where you can receive the support that one needs in order to tackle the stress one is passing through.
Joe, do you want to add anything?
Well, I agree. There should be more emphasis on the benefits of physical activity. Therefore, and we need to walk more. We need to, I don't know, take care of our bodies more. But in a way, this also depends on our environment. Therefore, the fact that many people complain that even where they live, they don't have access to open areas would influence this. Because we have so many people today going back home from work, sitting in front of the television, okay, and ordering food deliveries at home, which is not exactly conducive to a healthy lifestyle. And this in itself can also contribute to deterioration of mental well-being as well, mental well-being as well. Therefore, I think those priorities are worth noting. Mm-hmm. Physical activity followed by talking to someone, and talking to someone means building social relationships. Therefore, we cannot, hopefully, post-COVID, we won't continue to communicate with each other remotely, but physical meetings with friends, colleagues are very, very important, because you can't talk. And most of these talks, even if talking to someone to reduce stress, are informal talks, but which are nonetheless very meaningful and could lead to very positive results.
Thank you.
And
that brings us to the end.
Yes, and we have one last comment from Janet, where she said that the environment itself has become stressful, especially when surrounded by all these construction sites.
Yeah.
What I was going to add is sometimes you get home stressed because of traffic. Whilst you're getting home. So yes, that adds on to the workload that maybe we'd be experiencing. Do we have any comments? Any questions? If not, maybe do you have any closing remarks, Mr. Farrugia and Dr. Grech, about the topic what we discussed today?
Personally, I think it's an important topic. I think that it should be looked at bi-directionally, from the employer point of view, from the employee point of view. I think that we need to have more awareness about mental health at the workplace. I think one of the benefits that COVID brought about was that people talked about mental health, and even at the beginning of the pandemic, there was the mention of the fourth wave, which will be mental health issues. So I think it brought mental health more to the forefront, which I think is important, but I fear that going back to normal might also result in a decrease in this sort of attitude. However, the data is there in this research. We have seen that this is an issue which is important. It's felt by many people. So I think, yes, it's an important issue. And I think from the employer point of view, because I think it should be looked at as an investment. Investing in a better work environment will result in less burnout, which will also obviously affect productivity, need to train new people, absenteeism, turnover, etc. So I think it's important that this issue is taken seriously.
I think Tiziana also mentioned that tools that show employers how how engaged employees are, how engaged they are at the workplace would also help. So having employee engagement surveys, monitoring engagement on an ongoing basis. So that is very important, to have a pulse of what is going on in your organization and adapt accordingly, because as we can see, things are changing so often and in such a fast manner that we need to have a pulse of what employees are actually feeling and then adapt accordingly, so that productivity will still remain at a high, because they are interlinked. Joe, do you have anything to conclude? Yes, Dr. Grech.
Sorry, I was going to add, having a pulse of what's going on goes an extremely long way. Because if the employer is recognizing that this is an issue which needs to be addressed and is looking into it, then obviously the attitude is already there. So I think it's extremely important that when you're looking at understanding if there is a problem and having the attitude to solve or contribute towards this issue, I think it is extremely important. Many times mental health is seen as a bit of a stigmatizing issue, difficult to deal with. What am I going to do if someone mentions that they have a mental health issue? But starting from actually trying to address this and being open to address this will go a long way.
Thank you. Joe?
Yes, I agree that that many employers are becoming more open to address this issue, and I believe that this is a trend that will continue. It did gather momentum because of the COVID crisis, of course, but I think both because of, well, emerging situations, also because of international pressures. So even at ILO, even at EU level, we find a heightened awareness of mental well-being and the need to address these, to address such situations. And I believe that activities such as this seminar can be followed by others to continue to spread this culture of improving mental well-being at the place of work.
Okay. Thank you very much for your contributions. And I thank everyone for attending. I hope that you found the session interesting. We will be sending you the copy of the full report by email. And if you have any questions or you want to take this further and you want to discuss, please let us know and we will direct you to the maybe specialist that you need assistance by. Thank you very much. And I wish you a good day.
Thank you. Good day, everyone.
Thank you. Good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Good day.
Bye.